Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to unravel one of the great ironies of history, how the so-called war to end all wars actually paved the way for something much, much worse.
So how did that happen? How did a peace treaty, of all things, end up lighting the fuse for a global catastrophe? Well, it's a story of unintended consequences. So let's trace that path, domino by domino.
All right, we're going to break this down into 5 key parts. We'll start with the punishing peace treaty that ended World War I, see how that chaos fueled extremism. Then look at the world's failed attempts to appease it, witness the invasion that finally kicked things off, and see how it all exploded into a true world war.
So, our story doesn't actually start on a battlefield. It starts at a negotiating table. The Treaty of Versailles was supposed to guarantee a lasting peace, but for Germany, it felt like a national humiliation. And right here, this is where the first domino starts to wobble.
The treaty basically hit Germany with 4 major punishments. It stripped away huge chunks of its territory, it demanded crippling financial payments, it severely restricted the size of its army, and it created a League of Nations that, in the end, didn't really have the teeth to enforce its own rules.
And just to give you a sense of the scale here, Germany lost a staggering 10% of its land in Europe, plus all of its overseas colonies. This wasn't just lines on a map changing. For many Germans, this felt like a deep and personal insult.
And the economic hit? It was just as bad. The reparation payments were so massive, they caused hyperinflation. I mean, people's life savings became completely worthless, literally overnight. And that kind of economic chaos, well, it's the perfect breeding ground for radical, desperate new ideas to take hold.
And that brings us right to our next domino. All that instability created a massive power vacuum, and it was filled, very quickly, by charismatic leaders with some extremely dangerous ideas.
The big new ideology on the scene was fascism. Its appeal was a promise to restore national pride and order through aggressive nationalism, total state control, and absolute loyalty to a single, powerful leader.
But here's a really important distinction. While Mussolini's fascism in Italy was all about glorifying the state, Hitler's Nazism in Germany added this incredibly toxic layer of racist ideology. It was built on the totally false idea of an Aryan master race and a vicious, state-sponsored anti-Semitism.
You have to understand, both Hitler and Mussolini were absolute masters of propaganda. They used the new tech of the day, radio and film, to speak directly to millions, building these powerful cults of personality that painted them as the saviors of the nation. So, as Hitler starts to openly defy the Treaty of Versailles, other European leaders had a choice. Still haunted by the memory of World War I, they adopted a policy of appeasement. The idea was, basically, just give him what he wants and hopefully he'll be satisfied and we can avoid another terrible war.
But appeasement had the exact opposite effect. I mean, just look at this timeline. Every time they gave in, the Rhineland in 36, Austria, then Czechoslovakia in 38, it didn't satisfy Hitler. No way. It just emboldened him. Every step he took without consequence only encouraged him to demand more.
The whole policy was based on a fatal misreading of Hitler's ambitions. The Munich Agreement, where they handed him part of Czechoslovakia, was praised as guaranteeing peace for our time. But just months later, Hitler broke his promise and took the rest of the country, proving his word meant absolutely nothing.
So appeasement was a total failure. It was now crystal clear that talking alone wasn't going to stop Hitler. The final domino in Europe was about to fall, and this time there was going to be a real response.
This was the breaking point. September 1st, 1939. German tanks roll across the border into Poland. Britain and France, honoring their treaty with Poland, had no choice left. They declared war on Germany, and just like that, World War II had begun in Europe.
And Germany's invasion was devastatingly effective because they unleashed a brand new military tactic, blitzkrieg, or lightning war. The whole idea was to use rapid, coordinated strikes with tanks and planes to create shock and chaos, completely overwhelming the enemy before they even knew what hit them.
And while Britain and France did declare war, it was too little, too late to help Poland. They were too far away and mobilized too slowly. Poland was left to face the blitzkrieg all alone and was tragically and swiftly conquered. But here's the thing. This wasn't just a European war. Half a world away, a parallel conflict was brewing, driven by the ambitions of Imperial Japan. And it was this conflict that would finally pull a very reluctant United States into the fight. See, for years, Japan had been aggressively expanding its empire across Asia, which was putting it on a collision course with the US.
Then in 1940, it became official. Japan signed the Tripartite Pact, formally creating the Axis alliance with Germany and Italy.
To clear the path for its expansion, Japan decided it needed to take the U.S. Navy out of the picture. So they planned a single, devastating, preemptive strike. On the morning of December 7, 1941, Japanese planes filled the skies over Hawaii and launched a complete surprise attack on the naval base at Pearl Harbor.
The attack was a catastrophe. In less than 2 hours, over 2,400 Americans were killed, and a huge part of the U.S. Pacific Fleet was left burning and sinking in the harbor.
But if Japan hoped this would scare America into staying neutral, the plan backfired spectacularly. The attack on Pearl Harbor didn't break the American spirit, it forged it. It shattered American isolationism overnight and united the country for war. The very next day, the U.S. declared war on Japan, and the conflict officially became a world war.
So when you look back at all these fallen dominoes, the path to war offers some pretty clear and powerful lessons. That punishing peace treaties can sow the seeds of the next conflict, that economic desperation is a breeding ground for extremism, and that appeasing aggression often just encourages more of it.
And all that leaves us with one final crucial question. Knowing how this pattern of unchecked aggression escalated into a global catastrophe, how do we apply these incredibly hard-won lessons to the challenges we face in our own world today?